All right. Hey, everyone. So today I'm going to, excuse me, cover the notes from some of the part of the notes from 5.3, consequences of population growth and affluence. So um, this is these notes here are very specific. So I think we covered affluence a little bit the other day in class. When a population consumes or uses a large amount of resources per person in the population, right? So um, it is as a definition of affluence. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have uh, populations that are not affluent, that are basically living uh, what they call like hand to mouth or whatever. It's basically like they're basically everything they do is to get things for survival. Like, everything they do is to get is either growing food to eat or building shelter or making clothes or doing something. Like basically they're just trying to provide what they can to survive. Okay. Um, so there's part of this is something called subsistence agriculture. And subsistence agriculture is where essentially a uh, family or a population is producing just enough food to survive for their family or whatever the population is to survive, and then maybe a little extra to trade or barter for other necessities. But most of their work and their time is spent um, growing crops and or raising animals to for food for survival. Okay. And this is talking about what happens in those areas when you get rapid population growth in an area that is essentially that is really poor and that is is sort of struggling just to provide the um, everyday items for survival. And we saw that in the numbers where, if you recall, we looked at some of those fertility rates and the population growth, and we saw that some of the highest fertility rates and population growth were in countries that were very economically depressed. Okay, um, so these are some of it says in the book some of the options. I think of them as sort of like consequences or potential consequences of rapid population growth on a population that exists on subsistence agriculture. Okay, so one sort of solution or consequence is they can reform the system of land ownership. So this comes, as it says in the notes, the restructuring of current land ownership to a more equitable is like fair, equal land distribution that enables a majority of the population to be successful and productive. If the population is using land to raise animals and grow crops for food for to sustain their life, then everybody needs to have an amount of land. And in certain places, this is not the case. So I don't know if you've ever heard of like South Africa and the apartheid, which is essentially like their I don't want to call it a race like race wars, but like the struggle, the racism and because South Africa was colonized uh, by white Europeans um, and so there's this sort of inequity in land ownership and stuff. And um, so let me find in here. Uh, excuse me. So in South Africa, whites own 80. Well, then remember, this is back in like around 2003, 2006, but whites owned 87% of the land, and the average land holding or amount of land that they own of whites is 3,800 acres, the average, as opposed to 2.5 acres for like native blacks. So when the population is relying on the land to grow food and raise animals to sustain life, literally, I mean, this is not a profit creating venture for these people. Those kind of land inequalities can cause serious problems in it can cause societal strain, it can cause starvation, famine, all kinds of stuff like that. Okay, so restructuring the system of land ownership, which is very difficult because you can't really just rip land away from people. Um, and reparations and things are very difficult. Those are very difficult things to figure out. But that's one of the options to kind of help mitigate the impact of the rapid population growth. Okay, number two, intensify cultivation of existing land to increase production. So through either improved farming techniques or genetic enhancements of crops, increase the yield per acre for crop production. So, and remember, we're talking about areas that exist on subsistence agriculture. Areas like around us, you're only going to get minimal crop gain because we're already so technologically advanced and get so much out of our soil. But in areas where there's subsistence agriculture, even simple things like teaching them irrigation techniques um, or teaching them how to grow crops that are best suited for the soil and the soil and the climate conditions and stuff. So things like that can improve the yield and make them more successful and increasing the amount of yield that they're getting per acre. Okay. The third one, open up new land to farm. So the problem with opening up new land to farm is a few ways. One, no matter where you are, even if you're in these sort of poor areas of subsistence agriculture is happening, the area that is best for farming is going to be taken first. So any area that's really ideal for farming is already used. So if you're opening up new area, it's probably not that great for actually farming. Meaning the soil and stuff quality and water availability stuff is probably not fantastic. So that's one issue. Now, one thing you can do is convert land not currently used for agriculture purposes into farmland. So land that might be used for what are called cash crops. So cash crops are essentially things that are grown but are not used for food purposes. So if you think like tobacco or cotton or any of those type of things, like you could potentially convert those lands from cash crops into food product. Now, again, it depends on the type of land and if it's what can grow on there and stuff and things along those lines. Okay, so that's one thing. But the second kind of issue with this is you can result in, especially in these subsistence areas, in what are called slash and burn farming techniques. Now, if you've never heard of or if you've never really experienced slash and burn farming, that is, let me change to this here. Okay, so slash and burn farming techniques are essentially where people will literally they will cut down. That's really small. They will cut down areas of forest, and so that's the slash. Is they cut down areas of forest, and then to basically what they're trying to do is they're trying to clear land. So they'll cut down areas of forest, and then after the forest is cut down, they burn off the brush and all that kind of stuff. Now, what's the problem with slash and burn farming? Okay, so first of all, just to get an idea, this is not, as you can see from most of the images, this is not like big companies like logging it off and stuff like that. That's different. Okay, this is usually like very poor indigenous people who are trying to open up land to farm, to grow crops, or to raise animals. So the issue, there's several issues with this. One of the biggest ones is so in a rainforest or in a heavily forested area where a lot of this occurs, a lot of the actual nutrients and minerals are locked in the rainforest or in the organic material, the plant life itself. Because everything grows so much and so fast, there's actually not a lot of nutrients in the soil, because any nutrients and minerals that are in the soil get sucked up almost immediately because of the really high demand of all the plant life. So what happens is a lot of the nutrients and minerals, the nitrogen, phosphorus, all that stuff is locked in the plant material. When they slash and burn it, that doesn't get returned to the soil. The only way that the rainforest and the plant life and stuff in that area can sustain is when stuff dies, it returns the minerals and nutrients to the soil, and then it's almost immediately uptaken again by the plant life. So when they slash and burn an area of all the plant life, the actual soil underneath is not very good for growing crops. So they only get probably like 3 to 5 years of any kind of decent crop growth. And then the soil is essentially depleted and they have to move on to another area to slash and burn. Okay. The problem is the soil doesn't regenerate that quickly. It needs, it needs plant life to come in. It needs animals and things to die and to return nutrients to the soil. So essentially the slash and burning is really damaging to the local ecosystem and to the soil value and all that kind of stuff. But when these people are struggling to live, they're not going to really care about that if they're trying to just do anything in order to grow crops or raise animals to literally survive. So, so this can lead, the rapid population growth, because people are struggling to find areas to raise crops and animals to just survive, especially when the rapid population growth puts a strain on the available land areas. Okay. All right. So I'm actually going to skip the engaging in illegal activities for income. We're going to talk about that together in class. So number 5, emigrate. Now, remember, emigrate it's not immigrate, it's emigrate with an E. That means moving out of a country. So emigrating to other countries, leaving the country where there's a rapid population growth, either legally or illegally. And this is there's not a lot of mystery with this one. It's move to areas with more opportunity for employment or easier survival. For example, immigration into the US, so emigration from Mexico, immigration for us in the United States. A lot of people come from Mexico, and either legally or illegally, because even though they're taking jobs that for us seem very low paying, it's a lot better than things that they can find in their country. Okay. So and even though Mexico's not a extremely low country, in comparison, the United States is much better. And then in areas where you're getting rapid population growth and it's really hard to survive, you're going to get people moving to other countries, just for any kind of work. And then the last one is, a lot of times you'll see people moving to cities and seeking employment. In like factories and industry, people move to larger cities where there are more employment opportunities, usually because of industrial factories. They'll walk like 10, 20 miles a day just to get to a job where they have little to no job security. Sometimes they're hired by the day and they make barely anything, but again, you're talking survival. So another sort of negative consequence is essentially you've got a population explosion and you have very little means of survival and very few jobs to, create economic ability to survive. Okay. So that is 5 of the 6 impacts of the rapid population growth. We'll talk about the engage in illegal activities tomorrow.